Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 8, Notes 3. So we are going to be talking about multiplying radical expressions. So we're basically going to work on simplifying and looking at how multiplication is going to work when we're multiplying radicals. So let's kind of get a setup for that. What's that going to look like? So the first thing you want to do is you're going to multiply everything outside of the radical. That's kind of like our coefficient, is when we multiply things outside of the radical. Second step is to multiply things underneath the radical. So if they're both underneath the radical, then you can multiply them together. The next step is to simplify the remaining expression. So we need to make sure that we take out all of those pairs before we move further. So taking a look, remember that you can't add things unless they have the same thing underneath the square root. So that's something we're going to be working on later on in this note sheet, but I just kind of wanted to give that to you guys as a reminder before you move on. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. So you can only multiply things underneath the radical with other things underneath the radical. So for example, underneath the radical we have 2 times 5. 2 times 5 is the square root of 10. Can we simplify the square root of 10 anymore? Are there any pairs we can take out? No. So guess what? We're done. Then, taking a look at number 2, we want to multiply the outside with the outside. So we want to take 4 times 6. Now 4 times 6 is 24. Then we're just going to multiply things underneath the radical. 3 times 2, which is 6. So think about it this way. Can we break down what's underneath the radical anymore? Can we break down that 6 anymore? Well, no, we can't. So what we're going to do is we are going to call that our answer. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 3. So for number 3, we're going to multiply all what's underneath or outside the radical first. So first I'm going to take 2 times 4. Well, 2 times 4 is 8. Then underneath my radical, I'm going to multiply 3 times 2 times 3. Well, 3 times 2 times 3 is 6 times 3 is 18. Well, now I take a look at 18, and 18 is something I can simplify. It gives me 9 and 2, which I can break down to 3 and 3. So then I have the square root with 8 on the outside of 2 times 3 times 3. So then I have a pair of 3's that I can take out. So I have 8 times 3, and left underneath the radical is 2. Well, 8 times 3 is 24. And then I'm going to have that radical 2 left on the bottom. Taking a look at number 4, I'm going to take negative 6 times negative 4. That's going to give me negative 24. Then I'm going to take 5 times 15, and that's going to give me 75. So I'm going to take a look at dividing 75 in a way that's going to give me a perfect square. Well, I know 25 goes into 75, so I'm going to use 25 and 3. So 25 breaks down to 5 and 5. So then I'm going to have negative 24, and then underneath the radical I have 3 times 5 times 5. So I could take out a pair of 5's. So I have negative 24, and then I'm taking out that pair of 5's. And then left underneath the radical is 3. So negative 24 times 5 is a negative 120, and then left underneath the radical is the square root of 3. Next, taking a look at number 5. So when we take a look at number 5, what we want to do is, again, multiply underneath the radical. So let's just start by focusing on the coefficients. So 20 times 6 is going to give us 120. Now, we have to think back to Unit 3. When you're multiplying things of like basis, such as x2 and x to the first, you need to add exponents. X squared times x to the first is x cubed. Okay, when you add those exponents. So now let's take a look at breaking down 120. Well, I can break 120 down into 12 and 10 because it ends in a 0. Well, 12 breaks down to 4 and 3, 10 breaks down to 5 and 2, and 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. So then I end up getting underneath my radical, I have 3 2's, 1 3, and 1 5. And then I had x to the third, which means I need to have 1, 2, 3 x's. So a pair of 2's, and a pair of x's. So I'm going to take out my pair of 2's, take out my pair of x's. Then what's left underneath the radical? I have 2 times 3 times 5, and that's going to give me 30, and then I have a single x. So my final answer for that one is 2x times the square root of 30x. Taking a look at number 6, so we're going to do 18 times 3, and that's going to give me 54. Okay, so that is 54, and then I have this 4 on the outside from the other one. So I have 54, come on, and And then I have a squared times a squared. So we're going to add those exponents to get a to the fourth. So let's take a look at breaking down 54. Well, I know I can use 6 and 9. And 9 is a perfect square. And 6 is nowhere near, okay? So underneath the radical, and on the outside I have my 4, I'm going to have 2 times 3 times 3 times 3, and then I'm going to have 4 a's. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my like terms. I can circle my a's, or my 3's, my a's, and my a's. So on the outside, I'm going to have 4 times 3 times a, and left underneath my radical is 2 times 3, which is 6. So 4 times 3 is 12. A times a is going to be a squared, and then we're left with the square root of 6. So we get 12a squared square root of 6. So taking a look at this one, now we're going to be using that distributive property. So we're going to take it, we're going to multiply in. So we're going to take the square root of 3 and multiply that in. So the square root of 3 times the square root of 5. They're both underneath the radical, so we can multiply that 3 and that 5, and I get the square root of 15. But now, when I take and I multiply the square root of 3 times negative 4, this negative 4 is not underneath the radical, which means I need to keep it on the outside. And that square root of 3 is just going to be tacked on after it. I sometimes just like to write my smaller radical first. You don't necessarily have to. I'm not going to require that of you right now. And so that would be my final answer. So I didn't multiply the 4 by the 3 because the 4 isn't in a radical. Taking a look at number 8. So now we're going to take a look at number 8 and we're going to distribute that in. So the negative 3 gets multiplied by anything on the outside. And this 3 gets multiplied by anything on the inside. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6 because we can multiply those because they're both on the outside. And then that square root of 3 is just going to kind of tag along because it doesn't have anything to be multiplied with. Then we're going to take and we're going to do negative 3. That's going to be on the outside of whatever radical we create. So now, because it doesn't have anything to be multiplied with, so now we're going to take 3 times 6. And then we have 3 times 6, which is going to be 18. So then we can go ahead and we can split 18. So we have 9 and 2. And then we can split that down to 3 and 3. So we have negative 6 square root of 3 minus 3 times the square root of 2 times 3 times 3. So here I have a pair of 3's that I can take out. Negative 3 times 3, square root of 2. So I'm going to get negative 6 square root of 3 minus 9 square root of 2. Well, I can't add those together, okay? So I'm just going to write it with the square root of 2 first. Since they're different radicals, I can't add them together. And this right here is just my final answer. All right, let's take a look at number 9. So what I'm multiplying in is underneath the radical. So it can only be multiplied by things underneath the radical. So when I distribute that in, the 3 is going to come to the outside, and then I'm going to have the square root of 14x underneath. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply. 14 times 2 is going to give me 28. Again, both things are underneath the radical. X to the first times x to the first is going to give you x squared. So then we need to simplify. Well, 14x can't be simplified anymore, so that's just going to stay the same. 28x can. So 28 we can divide into 4 and 7, and 4 we can divide into 2 and 2. So then that's going to be 2 times 7 times x for the x squared. So let's go ahead and find our pairs. So pair there, pair there. So we have 3 square root of 14x minus 2 and then x, and then left underneath the radical is 7. So we have 3 square root of 14x minus 2x square root of 7. So let's take a look at number 10. So for number 10, I'm going to distribute in the square root of 5. So when I do that, that first 5 is going to stay the same. And then I'm going to be multiplying 5 times 5, which is 10. Come on. Then I want to take, and I'm going to keep that negative 4 on the outside, and then I'm going to take the square root of 8 times 5, which is 40. So now I need to simplify this 40 down. The 10 can't be simplified anymore, so 5 square root of 10 is going to stay there. The 4 can be distributed down into 4 and 10, and the 10 can be distributed down into 2 and 2. So then I end up getting 4 times the square root of 2 times 2 times 10. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take that 2 out. So I get 5 square root of 10 minus 4 times 2 square root of 10. 5 square root of 10 minus 8 square root of 10. So it worked out this time that we had the same radical, so we can subtract it. 5 minus 8 is negative 3 square root of 10. So that right there is our final answer. Let's take a look at number 11. So for number 11 and for number 12, this needs to be solved using the box method, okay, or FOIL, whichever one you prefer. I usually use the box method. So to start the box method out, we're going to line up our terms. So we have 3 square root of 5 and then 3 square root of negative 5, and we're going to multiply that in. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times the square root of 5 is 3 square root of 5. 3 times the negative square root of 5 is 3 negative square root of 5. Negative square root of 5 times negative square root of 5. So we're going to multiply both of those together underneath the radical to get negative square root of 25. So we're going to have 9 plus 3 square root of 5 minus 3 square root of 5 minus square root of 25. So the only thing is the square root of 25 that I can break down into 5 and 5. So it all works out to be pairs. And we all know that the square root of 25 is 5, so that makes sense. Well, plus 3 square roots of 5 minus 3 square roots of 5 are going to cancel out. Square root of 25 is negative 5. So 9 minus 5 is just going to be 4 for your final answer for number 11. So let's take a look at number 12. So let's go ahead and write this out. So we have the square root of 6 and the square root of 8, the square root of 24, and the square root of 2. Well, I'm going to make this a little bit easier on myself. I'm going to simplify down the square root of 24. 24, I can do 4 and 6, and then 2 and 2. So 24 is going to simplify down to be 2 square root of 6. When I do the square root of 8, I can break that down into 4 and 2 and then 2 and 2. So that's going to be 2 square roots of 2 that I can simplify 8 down to. So that's going to make my multiplication easier. So for the first box, I'm going to take 2 square root of 6 times the square root of 6. So I'm going to get 2 times the square root of 6 times 6, which is 36. Then I'm going to take 2 square root of 6 times 2 square root of 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4 for the outside. And then underneath the radical is 6 times 2, which is 12. Then I'm going to take 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 6, which is going to give me the square root of 12. Then I'm going to take square root of 2 times the square root of 2. So I get 2 times the square root of 4. So now I'm going to go ahead and write all those terms out so I can simplify them. So I have 2 times the square root of 36 plus 4 square root of 12 plus the square root of 12 plus 2 square roots of 4. So let's go ahead and simplify that. Well, 36 I can break down to 6 and 6. So I end up getting a pair of 6s. So that's going to be 2 times the square root of 6 times 6. Out of 4 I can break that down, or out of 12 I can break that down to be 4 and 3. And then 2 and 2. So then I get plus 4 times the square root of 2 times 3. And then for the 12, again, I'm going to break that down to be 2 times 3. And then for this last one, 2 square root of 4, that's going to be 2 times the square root of 2 times 2. So now let's go ahead and find our pairs. This should be a plus sign. All right, so first we can take out a pair of 6s. So we have 2 times the square root of 6. The radical's gone now because we took all of our pairs out. Here I can take out a pair of 2. So I'm going to have 4 times 2, but I still have that 3 left underneath the radical. Here I have a pair of 2's, so I can take out a pair of 2's, and then I'm left with radical 3. Now here, all of my pairs are taken out, and there's nothing left underneath the radical. So this is just going to be 2 times 2. So then I'm going to have 12 plus 8 square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 3 plus 4. Now I need to combine my like terms. Well, 12 plus 4 is 16. And then 8 square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 3 is going to give me 10 square root of 3. So that is your final answer for number 12. So that concludes your note video for today. Please make sure you take your quiz. Thanks for listening.